Hey friends, thanks for tuning in. We really do appreciate it here at sgtreport.com, where we are documenting the collapse. And we have back on the line the marketing director for Miles Franklin, Andy Hoffman, a good friend of ours. Andy, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing just peachy, and I cannot wait for the FOMC minutes of the April 29th meeting to be published, because as we all know by now, they are 100% doctored, or I should say emphasized certain points, for whatever the current market conditions are, meaning if the economy gets worse since the meeting, then they make the minutes look more dovish, and if it gets better, then they make them look more hawkish, to look like they knew what they were talking about. And right now, it doesn't get worse when you talk about a perfect storm that's gathering against the Fed and pushing Janet Yellen to the Yellen reversal that we know is coming. People think that this whole commodity crash that happened last year is over simply because the oil PPT pushed oil back up against all the fundamentals from 42 to 58. And this is compared to 105 where it was in the fall. But the fact is, outside the commodities that get all the publicity, like oil and copper, which I also think has been supported by the government, everything else has continued to fall. And now that all the commodities, such as oil and particularly base metals, which basically crashed, they fell 10% in the last 2 days, are falling again. You're looking at a commodity index that's getting dangerously close to the February lows, which, by the way, are the same lows as we saw at the bottom in 2008. And now the dollar is surging anew, so it's causing currencies around the world to plunge anew. And on top of that, you have the added bugaboo that interest rates are now inexorably rising, no matter how bad the economic data is. And we learned from a really good article from Zero Hedge, where they did some serious research. They almost proved that mysterious Belgian buyer of treasuries back a few years ago was the Chinese.
Yeah.
And now they're selling. The Chinese are, it appears, are major sellers, which makes sense because they have to fund their new QE program that they just started. And if the Chinese are in fact going to sell their, I think it's $1.5 trillion of treasuries, it's game over for the Fed. They have to announce at some point, if rates rise much more, a major QE program that's going to have to offset all of that selling.
Well, there's so much to talk about, Andy. I'm going to make a quick list here for you so we can try to cover all of this. We've got the LIBOR rigging, 5 criminal banks being charged. Bankers are actively now publicly articulating their desire to ban cash. Unfunded liabilities and pensions across this nation are staggering. We've got George Stephanopoulos, the prime example of a mockingbird at ABC News, signing a $105 million contract just before it was revealed that he gave $75,000 to his buddies at the Clinton Foundation. Given that we know, Andy, that the criminals are running the show, where would you like to begin today?
Now you talk about the banning of cash. I wrote an article called the war against cash that can't be won. The governments clearly want to track what everyone does.
Right.
And that's what's worrisome about that.
That's right.
It's
a freedom issue.
And that's why you need to get out of the system as soon as you can. That's what's so great about gold and silver.
Yeah, it's a freedom issue, and the bankers wanting to ban cash is so insidious because we ought to be able to trade between ourselves, buy and sell between ourselves, with some measure of privacy should we want to do that. And as Warren from SGT Report, an SGT Report reader, notes, what an instant way to create really more inflation in the system, Andy, because as you know, every time somebody uses a credit card or a debit card, there's a fee associated with that. So if they're going to ban cash, presumably they could ban check writing, I suppose, between companies too. So every single transaction made, there would be a rake for the banks on every transaction made. I mean, it's just so fascist. It defies belief, but they're trying to sell it to a dumbed-down public.
Sinclair said years ago, "Gots, get out of the system," and of course, that's what we all promote through not just precious metals, but staying out of the banking system. But what they're trying to do is push everyone into the banking system, which ultimately, even if they don't do anything like bail it out or bail it in, you're being taxed because it's essentially NERP because it's zero interest rates, and then they throw all these fees that you're talking about on it, and then it's inflated away, and then of course they can bail it in if they want to. So the fact is they're trying to herd everyone into the Titanic, and that's what we are so desperately trying to get people to do while they still can, is to get off it before they're forced onto it.
Yeah, and let's get back to this commodities plunging issue that you started the conversation with, because against the backdrop of plunging commodity prices, Andy, we've seen surging gold and silver prices. Actually, since the last time you and I talked, silver and gold both broke through their 200-day moving average. And what I find absolutely fascinating, Andy, is that against the backdrop of the Mockingbird media and the Mockingbird financial media constantly telling us that silver is nothing more than an industrial metal, I find it absolutely fascinating that on a daily basis, if you look at the gold and silver charts, they really track each other beautifully. Silver acts like a monetary metal and really behaves in a very similar way chart-wise to what gold does on a daily basis, and both have surged recently. Which means what, Andy? Because we know the prices of these metals are manipulated by the cartel. Why is it that silver does track gold so tightly?
Well, the first thing I'll say that struck me by what you just said was, I have so, you know, realized that markets are so rigged that I literally no longer look at charts anymore. I mean, I used to look all the time in the 200-day moving average. And yes, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with looking, but it's gotten to the point where I don't even look anymore.
Right.
So when you told me that they broke the 200-day moving averages, it's news to me because I never look because I'm like, it's so rigged. They just will do whatever they want until, of course, they lose, and then maybe those averages will take some more meaning again. But yes, to some, it's definitely meaningful because they, from a momentum perspective, they try to keep them below them to get as few people as possible trading them. As far as silver acting like a monetary metal, I mean, that's nothing new. That's not like something that's just happened.
Right.
There's been, I have the numbers. There's a 99% correlation directionally between gold and silver, and has been for the 15 years I've been watching this sector.
Right.
Silver is certainly more volatile because it's smaller and more manipulatable. But you look any given day at the chart, and they're almost identical. And they're, if one's up, the other's up, and so again, it's 99% correlation. Now the cartel, the media that's trying to denigrate them will constantly, like if base metals get hit, they'll say, well, silver got hit because it was a base metal. And then if base metals go up and silver doesn't, they'll go, well, the economy's strong, so we don't need the monetary metal silver. I mean, that's just propaganda. But the fact is, the last 2 days, I mean, I've been talking about the copper PPT for maybe 2 months now because I'm watching all the other commodities plunge. And I'm watching copper, and with it, lead and zinc go up. And copper has had a doubling of its inventories in the LBMA in the last 6 months. It's absolutely ridiculous. You're watching the Chinese economy collapsing, every other industrial commodity in China, which is the biggest user of copper, collapsing, and I'm watching copper go up, and I'm going, they're just supporting it like oil because it's a very well-known, highly publicized industrial commodity. And now, it's now in the last 2 days, I'm talking about Monday to Tuesday afternoon, these base metals all fell like 10% on average. And they're still falling. I'm watching zinc now. It was $1.10 on Monday. It's under $1 right now. I mean, that's a big move. Again, and before yesterday's silver smash, the 10% drop in base metals happened before silver was hit yesterday. It was all done. And then suddenly at about 10:20 a.m., of course, after 10, they just come in and smash silver. I think it fell something like 3.5% in 5 minutes. A typical waterfall decline. It has nothing to do with base metals and everything. That was just gold and silver were doing too well, as they were doing, by the way. If people remember when commodities were crashing January, February, March, gold and silver was surging. Everything was falling. Oil was plunging. The dollar was surging. Commodities were crashing, and gold and silver were going up because they're monetary. And again, like you're talking about now, it's getting ugly out there economically and in the commodity land, and the dollar's surging. So they had to come in yesterday afternoon and quash all the momentum. I mean, at Miles Franklin, we're actually seeing business pick up. I haven't seen this in a while. Across the board buying, all that selling I was telling about, that's done. And now people are buying again. So again, they're very nervous, and things like the Fed minutes, they're very terrified of putting out stuff that says what they should be saying, which is we're getting more dovish, so that they're smacking gold around and silver. But the fact is, you're not going to stop this train, especially with the. I mean, God, have you seen the mining stocks? I mean, we're talking about some of them are on death's door right now. Not the juniors, which are all dead. I'm talking about there are major miners out there which are close. These prices are not sustainable, and the more they stay down there, the more the peak gold that I talked about is guaranteed. So again, a perfect storm, I think, is coming together for precious metals demand, and the desperate rats, on the Titanic are just doing everything possible to prolong that day. And so I can't wait to see what happens if they can't put the genie on the interest rate bottle as rates inexorably rise amidst a massive debt edifice and a collapsing global economy.
Well, let's talk about that massive debt edifice. Illinois unfunded pension liabilities reach $104.6 billion. As you know, Andy, the unfunded pension liabilities in California are $198 billion. Illinois is now faced with a $2 billion payment to creditors. You want to talk about unsustainability. People don't understand what's coming for them, and it's this tsunami of debt, the collapse. I mean, you've written about it here in your article, The Death of Gold, when you say, clearly the cartel is laboring under the pressure of a collapsing global economy, exploding worldwide money printing, surging international gold demand, plunging COMEX inventories, and the rapidly spreading realization that peak gold is upon us, not to mention the ominous storm cloud gathering above the entire world, massive, exponentially growing mountains of debt. 200 trillion worldwide, plus the unfunded liabilities which I just mentioned, such as pension, Social Security, and Medicare requirements, and of course, countless trillions of the over-the-counter derivatives, shadow banking liabilities, peer-to-peer loans, and God knows what else. This tsunami of debt couldn't be more obvious to anybody paying attention. It makes really me wonder, Andy, why I can't get my friends, neighbors, and colleagues to want to take any interest in purchasing physical precious metals. I mean, I think that they must be insane. I mean, if you're paying attention,
everyone's in debt, which is why no one's in the stock market, which is why CNBC has all-time low ratings. I mean, can you imagine that the NASDAQ is above its 2000 peak or 1999, and CNBC has an all-time low rating? Mm-hmm. It's because it's no longer a market. It's just a playground for the 1%. No one's watching. It has absolutely zero correlation with the economy. And now we know that central banks are overtly buying stocks. The Swiss and the Japanese actually tell you it's their policy. So that's what's going on in stock markets. And as far as the debts, they've only gotten bigger. I mean, no one has done it more than China. I mean, China's added, I think it's 15 trillion of debt since 2008. And that's why they initiated this week a QE program to bail out essentially every municipality that's going under. They're going to swap Chinese government bonds for these toxic bonds that are worthless of the municipalities. That's probably why they're selling all the treasuries. They need to fund all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's across the board. It's everywhere. Look at Greece. Greece is a perfect example. Their debt is more than twice than what it was 3 or 4 years ago, largely because of the bailouts. And then there's Puerto Rico, which the U.S. backs the way it backed Fannie Mae, so we're going to have to pay that. And then all the municipalities. And, I wrote about my article, California Inflation, I think it was a year and a half ago. And California is dying, and now this drought is really is just absolutely send them into the ocean. I think it's quite a perfect karma that they had this big oil spill offshore Los Angeles yesterday, because in the environmental cap of America, but California is dead in the water right now, and Illinois has been one of the that's a perfect example of a Rust Belt state. They've lost everything, and Chicago was just downgraded to junk. I think the state of Illinois is on the verge of being downgraded to junk. So they'll be on top of the list, but it's everywhere. We were just talking before this call. I've been writing for the past 2 weeks how everyone in Denver is getting like a 15 to 30% property tax increase. It's not a coincidence that we're a shale state and all of a sudden the government needs more money, but it's everywhere that this is happening, whether it's taxes, whether it's fees, whether it's surcharges. Everywhere, these creeping, you look at your cable bill and they throw in an extra buck every month, and your gym bill and your security bill and this and that. It's everywhere. And the Fed hasn't even get started with QE4 yet, because when they do, you won't even recognize your current cost structure. It's going to get so bad.
Well, you wrote in your article, Lies, Collapse, and the Return of Precious Metals, something that really resonated with me. You wrote, Wall Street, Washington, and the mainstream media. The first of these triplets of terror will do anything to be elected, while the second would sell their mothers' souls for profit. I'm going to end there because it takes me back to the George Stephanopoulos piece. CFR member, right? Council on Foreign Relations member, George Stephanopoulos, a talking head mouthpiece over at ABC. He used to be the communications director for the Clinton administration there in the White House, and he gave $75,000 to the Clinton Foundation, didn't disclose it to anybody, and right before that he signed a $105 million contract with ABC. These people literally would sell their souls, their mother's souls, to lie to us. And essentially that's why we call them the Mockingbird mainstream media, Andy. I mean, if we don't have a fourth estate, if we don't have honest journalists keeping the three branches of government in check, we're completely screwed, because, our friends, neighbors, and colleagues, they listen to these people. They love these people.
105 million for George Stephanopoulos.
One,
Is he that much of a draw? To me, he's a complete zero.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with CNN pays their anchors tens of millions of dollars, and they don't have any viewership. I think it's the corporatocracy rewarding the made men for their commitment to the New World Order. I honestly,
Yeah.
at this point, that is what I believe because
Yeah,
you're right.
like
Because
like Sarah Palin on Fox getting all my. I mean, George Stephanopoulos, as far as you say, communications director, he's no different than the Ari Fleischmans of the world. He's just
no,
like
that's right.
he just sits there. I mean, the only thing he's famous for, aside from being generally younger and more good-looking than the average communications director, is he's the one who inadvertently used the word plunge protection team for the first time. So he's the one who coined it, but no one even cares anymore. Politics don't even matter. Everyone knows that they're all out to kill, to destroy us. I say kill. They're all out to destroy us figuratively. And the further you can get away from the system, the better. I mean, a perfect example is me, my voting patterns. I think I voted. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I voted for Kerry so that Bush would lose, right? Then I voted for Obama so that the Bush team would lose. Then I voted for Gary Johnson just because I hated them both. And now I'm not going to vote for anyone. It's gotten to the point where no one cares because we know that they're all out to destroy the country. It's, Hillary's emails. I mean, it's a very scary state because there's no one out there looking out for us.
No, it's true. And they're going to hand us Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton on a silver platter. Take your choice of two really uber criminals from uber criminal families. Really, they're criminal families that have been in control of this country for several decades now. And the Clintons and the Bushes are, they're chummy. I would say that the Bushes made the Clintons. And again, George Stephanopoulos, a made man because he's willing to play ball. He's willing to really throw the country and his countrymen under the bus in favor of the New World Order and his $105 million contract. And, it's just disgusting. Another disgusting thing here to discuss, Andy, is this LIBOR rigging. I'm not sure what you think LIBOR rigging was worth totally, in its totality, but 5 banks have been charged, and they're only going to collectively pay $5.6 billion in fines. And the banks are Citigroup, J.P. Morgan, of course, always in the mix with criminality, Barclays, RBS, which is the Royal Bank of Scotland, and UBS, Andy, is receiving immunity. Of course, here's another piece from Zero Hedge. UBS gets probation for rigging the $5 trillion a day FX market. UBS will pay $545 million and plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. It's astounding to me, Andy, because, these corporations can plead guilty, for fraud, but nobody goes to jail. I mean, LIBOR rigging, Andy. I mean, if anybody wants to second guess us on the fact that there is a collusion and there is a cartel that fixes prices, look no further than LIBOR rigging.
Well, UBS just admitted that they rigged the gold market. Remember, they paid a fee,
Right.
fine for that reason. And then, of course, you had the gold fix where Deutsche Bank was kicked off it for rigging it. So, I mean, again, the evidence, it's not like, people say conspiracy theory, gold and silver, there's nothing conspiracy theory. I mean, GATA and people like us, we've been coming up with the evidence for years. I mean, as smoking gun as you're going to get. I mean, my God, Barrick way back 10 years ago said, yeah, we were rigging the market as an agent of the government. I mean, but look, everything is rigged. No one's paying attention. It's like you're talking about this. Again, it's another thing. Yeah, I saw something in the news, banks having a scandal they're going to pay up their fine. I didn't even look anymore to see what it was. Yeah, LIBOR, whatever, the next one. It's just, the slap on the wrist. I mean, LIBOR was worth, what was it worth? It was worth trillions. I mean, it's the biggest market in the world, and it was on a daily basis. They were siphoning off money and, of course, manipulating rates, which had even bigger ramifications. But, no one cares. Right now, these guys run the system, and they'll run it until the system dies. And that's what must inevitably happen. It's a mathematical certainty.
Well, here's an article from Zero Hedge, overheard in the FX rigging cartel chat room. Mess this up and sleep with one eye open. One Barclays FX trader, when he became the main euro trader for Barclays in 2011, was desperate to be invited to join the cartel because of the trading advantages from sharing information with the other main traders of the euro. After extensive discussion of whether or not this trader would add value to the cartel, he was invited to join for a 1-month trial, but was advised mess this up and sleep with one eye open at night. It brings us back to those mysterious deaths of so many bankers, so many suicided bankers out there, Andy. There's so much going on behind the scenes. I've long said that what's going on behind the scenes is far, far scarier than any of the things that you and I discuss as they try to keep this thing stitched together. Can you imagine the conversations that go on behind the scenes at the highest level of J.P. Morgan and the Treasury and the Fed?
Right. Well, as you know, this is not an area I try to go too far into because I don't believe that there's a global collusion. I believe there's fiefdoms throughout the world that are all that they all became powerful because of the fiat currency system, and to an extent they certainly collude. There's no doubt the ECB and the Fed, they all talk about what they're going to do, and if things get bad enough, then they you know, that then they'll do some things together. For the most part, I think that it's all individual chickens with their heads cut off. But I agree 100% that what they are saying, if anyone even heard one of these conversations, they wouldn't believe, you know, how much, because every day they're sitting there going, we have to rig the market this way. We have to, heck, we have to start wars. We have to do things that keep us in power. And I agree completely that the things, you know, it's the iceberg. You see the tip above the water, and whatever's below is far, far scarier.
Well, yeah, because I mean, these guys, what on a daily basis, don't they need to issue another, what is it, $500 million in bonds a day to keep this government running? I mean, how much additional debt is being added to the, the 18 trillion where we already sit on a daily basis? It's literally staggering.
Well, it's like, you know, they talk about these every time Greece owes a new payment, like, oh, they owe $400 million. And I'm like, over the QE3, and again, just the overt portion of QE3, which I did a piece, Proof of the Tapering Mirage, that they said they basically were doing 2 or 3 times more than they said, is, you know, those $450 million payments that Greece owes, that's how much the Fed printed every, I think, 4 hours over a 20-month period from 2012 to 14. And we know they're still doing it now. They just don't tell you. I mean, that's how much money is printed out there. And, you know, I sit there and I stare at the U.S. national debt that's been sitting at around 18.2 for 4 or 5 months now because they're playing these shenanigans again with well, we're up against the theoretical debt ceiling. We're allowed to suspend it. So we're just doing all the stuff behind closed doors. You know, again, it's all under the water. And then one day you look up and 18.2 will change to 18.9. I mean, so, you know, it's a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi schemes must grow larger to survive, and they must grow larger without confidence being lost, which is why so much dedication and effort is being made into manipulating everything from stocks to bonds to gold and silver. The thing is that they are losing this battle. I mean, the currency markets they've lost, the commodity markets they've lost. And, you know, I mean, look at the confidence numbers. People don't trust their governments anymore. People don't trust their presidents. They don't trust the central banks. So, again, something is going to give soon. What will it be? I don't know. But, you know, these fiefdoms are not brilliant people. They just are powerful people. And the problem is that the fundamentals of the world are going against them, as I call it, the unstoppable tsunami of reality.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me ask you one last thing here. So we know IMF is probably not going to be able to squeeze blood out of a turnip with Greece. There's no money to give them. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to levy transactions. They're going to try to levy fees on banking transactions. They're going to try to squeeze money out of Greece any way they can. But beyond Greece, and we rarely hear it talked about very, very much, Andy, is Ireland and other nations that are in as bad or worse shape. And against the backdrop of Ireland's problems with the bankers and the debt that they owe, there's water wars going on in Ireland, and they're trying to charge people a bunch of money just for the pleasure of getting drinking water out of a tap. It seems they're coming after us now, really at the level of base human needs. They want to come after our water, and I don't want to get off track here with that conversation specifically, but we talk about Greece a lot. What about Ireland? What about these other nations? I mean, at what point does this EU bow break and everything comes crashing down?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this for some time. I mean, Ireland's actually probably the best off of the five pigs. I remember it was just last year where Portugal's largest bank had to be nationalized. And then, of course, you have Italy and Spain. In Spain, you have Catalonia, which is a quarter of the nation's economy, wants to secede. And they have this Podemos party led by, I think his name is Pablo. Oh, I forgot his name already, but he's going to be elected president. This is a brand new party. He's going to be elected president in December, and he wants to leave the euro. And in Italy, Beppe Grillo, Five Star Movement, they are the biggest They have the biggest percentage of the parliament in Italy. He wants to leave the euro. And of course, Marine Le Pen in France, I call the pigs, by the way, the PFIGs, because France should be part of them. She's going to take over France next year. I think it's 2017, and she wants to leave the euro. So, I mean, somewhere, some shape or form, something is going to happen in Europe. I mean, is it as simple as Greece, which is right under our nose that we're all looking at? Possibly. More likely, it'll be something we don't even understand just yet. But something will break this up. There's just too wide of a gap between reality and what we're told reality is, and what the markets are saying. And well, the markets aren't saying, where the markets are being put. And so, this is why we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And from a financial perspective, there is no better way than to own physical gold and silver. It's the one thing that they can't manipulate the physical stuff, and they can't get their hands on it, no matter how much people scaremonger you about it. And it's outside of the system. And by the way, it's trading below the cost of production at an historically low price compared to basically any metric you want to use. And all you have to do is look at the condition of the mining industry if you don't believe me.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And that's why we have these conversations. I mean, I know that we're preaching to the choir largely. I'm not sure that there's too many new listeners that are going to be joining us for this conversation that will be woken up. But the sad reality is that, the tsunami of debt that we talked about, it's a great Ponzi that when it collapses is going to leave people with literally nothing. And I think that day is getting closer. Andy, how can people protect themselves if they want to work with Miles Franklin? What can you guys do for people?
Again, we've been around 26 years, A+ Better Business Bureau rating with not a single customer complaint. All you have to do is give us a call, 800-822-8080, or you can email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com. And by the way, coming soon, I believe we're going to be offering online purchasing. It's not done yet, but I think it's pretty close.
Well, that's good news. I mean, people do love to sit at the comfort of their computer and, make purchases whenever the mood strikes them. Sometimes that's 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes it's, 4 in the morning when you can't sleep. So that's good news, Andy. Andy, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Look forward to the next one.
Well, thanks, Andy. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate your support at sgtreport.com and thelibertymill.com. And check out our news site, thephaser.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.